The PMBOK guide defines a process as a set of interrelated actions and activities performed to achieve a specified set of products, results, or services. They are the roadmaps that help you move forward in the right direction. Think of them as a set of interrelated actions to meet a predefined output. It involves inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs. In fact, it acts as a framework and provides logical interactions among processes. It is iterative in nature, building on from the last step onwards and integrates the project as it goes forward. We have already looked at these process groups in detail earlier. So, here we will just do a quick recap. Every project has 5 process groups. These are initiating, planning, execution, monitoring and control, and closing. During the initiation process, you define and authorize projects. In the planning process, you refine and define the course of action. In the execution process, you complete the defined work as per the plan. In the monitoring and control process, you track, review, regulate and change. In the closing process, you finalize and get approval. These processes follow a horizontal and sequential flow. This is the same for all projects. The nature of interactions may vary depending on the type of project you are working on. A process must not be confused with project phases. While phases are like steps or seasons for a project, the process is the framework for doing a project. They happen for every project, irrespective of the application areas and the industry. In fact, it is important to visit them in every project phase to ensure your project is in track. It is in sync with the overall organizational objective. It is delivering high-quality outputs, and it will deliver what it was conceptualized for within the time frames and the costing it was planned for. Let us recap what happens during each of these processes. The initiating process group consists of those processes performed to define a new project or a new phase of an existing project by obtaining authorization to start the project or phase. In this phase, you decide the initial scope of the project, the initial budget, the initial timelines, the initial resources needed, the stakeholders, and the overall outcome of the project. The bottom line of this process group is to identify the need to do a project, identify who the key stakeholders are, make them aware of the scope of the project, come up with an initial budget and timeline for achieving this. The project manager is selected during this phase and their roles and responsibilities established. This is all documented in the project charter and stakeholder register. Once this is done, the project manager has the approval to go ahead with the project. The project charter and stakeholder register are used for defining processes and activities in other process groups. The main purpose of the planning process group is to define project objectives and come up with a roadmap or a course of action. This is done through a detailed project management plan. In this process, you establish the scope of effort, objectives, constraints, assumptions. You define project life cycle and the course of action to meet the objectives. You also decide the approach of monitoring and controlling throughout the project. You develop project documents. This is all done through the project management plan, which contains the details of what all needs to be done throughout the project till its completion. This includes the timeline, budget, and clear communication to stakeholders as to how the project will be done in each phase and throughout the life cycle. Here you collect the requirement and define the scope. Next, you create a work breakdown structure, dividing the project into manageable smaller ones. You define the activities, their sequence, what resources you will need to accomplish them, and how long would these activities last. You will also develop a schedule, putting in appropriate milestones to be delivered at each phase. You will create cost estimates and budgets based on these activities and factor in risks, issues, and the mitigation plan to counter or fix these. You will also develop a resource plan and communication plan that is appropriate for your stakeholders. This process follows what is called rolling wave planning. What this means is that in the planning phase, you will make initial plans. As the project progresses and the details become clearer, these plans will be amended to factor these in, make the plans more detailed and elaborate, and make it more accurate and achievable. So, for example, you need to work on a project which will go on over the next 3 years. At the planning process, you will only have information or clarity over the next, say, 3 months. So, you make the project plan and factor in milestones and deliverables based on the information you have available. You put in budgets, resource estimates, etc. based on current information. As the project progresses and you get more clarity, you keep adding these to make your plan and estimates more up-to-date and elaborate. Next is the executing process group, or as we like to call it, the process where the action starts happening. In this process group, the activities planned, the deliverables thought of, are worked upon. Here you execute the work as per your project management plan, using the actions and activities as per the plan. Here your deliverable comes into the picture. The product scope becomes clearer and gets defined at this time. In the product scope are included the product features, characteristics, functionality, etc. of the product. During this process, you might also encounter changes. These changes may be due to change in a law or regulation, or due to change in requirements, or maybe the stakeholders have an additional feature they want added to the product, which was not there in the initial scope. Well, whatever the reason be for the change, these need to be evaluated, properly approved and managed. It is also important to communicate clearly and effectively with the team as well as the stakeholders in this process group, so that all of them are on the same page. Activities and tasks are assigned to the team members using the work authorization system. Maximum budget is utilized during this process group. It is important to prepare work performance information for monitoring and controlling activities in line with the project management plan and the overall business objective. So, you have initiated the project, planned it well, and are now executing it. Congratulations! But wait! You do need to monitor and control the project on a continuous basis to ensure your planning and execution leads to a successful project. How do you do that? By measuring and analyzing the performance at regular intervals throughout the project. You track and review the progress. You identify any areas that need action or improvements and initiate the change or corrective actions. For example, if one activity missed its planned deadline, it may have an impact on the next set of activities, the resource plan, the budget, and the overall project timelines. You may have to adjust the schedule or the budget to ensure your project stays on track. Think of monitoring and control as a regular health checkup of your project. The more thorough and regular it is, the healthier your project will be. Yay! You have delivered the final outcome of your project. Your project is over. Oh, is it? Well, the project does not automatically get over once you have delivered the final outcome. This is where the closing process group comes into play. In this process group, you perform all the processes to finally close the project and get a sign-off from the stakeholders. So you close procurement and you close the project. How do you do that? You make the closing procedures, close open contracts, verify all product scope requirements are met, submit the final performance report, archive project records, document lessons learned, hand off final product to the customer, get approval and sign off, and release the resources back to their functional teams. Congratulations on successfully completing your project.